Nothing like botching, nothing like botching some notes first thing in the afternoon. It is hot as balls out there. I'm still probably a little bit sweaty. Sorry, I went from doing some other stuff, and now I'm trying to be all professional and shit. It's not really working out. This is Steve, my buddy Steve Smith. He's on here often as Steve from Blytheville. This is his probably 70 or 71. I think he said he bought it in 71 or 72. ES335. It's as old as I am. Maybe later we'll compare it to my 335. But this thing's really nice. I'm playing it through his Princeton, which is here for some longevity, reliability upgrades, and a new reverb tank. We'll revisit that a little bit. Let's get to people's questions. I always forget when I'm talking, it gates me, so we'll revisit that in a moment. Let's get to people's questions. Good to see everybody. Let's see. Is the Mojotone Anthem a good 8-inch speaker? Well, my mind goes to two things. First of all, I've not tried that speaker from Mojotone, so I don't know. I've tried other Mojotone speakers that were very good, so I have no reason to think it's not. Second of all, a good 8-inch speaker is a rare and, still not that great thing. 8-inch speakers kind of range from suck to meh. So if you get something in the high meh range, you're probably going to be pretty happy. 8-inch speakers are always an afterthought for budget amps. They typically don't sound very good. Now I'm talking a single 8-inch speaker in a combo, like you find in a Champ or something. If you have 4x8s where the cabinet has some volume and the speakers can work together, you can get some good sounds with some 8s. But don't expect too much out of any 8-inch in a combo. Let me turn on my fan so I don't die. Sorry, I should have had this on before. Just a second, gotta make it oscillate at me. All right, let me know if that's too loud in the background. Let's see. But thank you for asking, Goody. Hey, Catalan, thank you very much. Appreciate that. The thumbnail shot, that is not film, that's digital. That's my old Fuji X-E2 with a Voigtländer 18mm 2.8. Though on the Fuji that 18 becomes 27. So 27mm, 28mm. I went to see I ducked into a club where my buddy Joe Restivo was playing with his quintet, and I got some good shots. But the lighting was really bad, and they had purple and orange lights on the stage and a Christmas tree, casting Christmas tree colors on everything. So I quickly abandoned color because everything was all over the map. Went to black and white, and I was like, embrace the low light. So in order to get anything even close to freezing the action, I had to go to 2.8, and then I had a really shallow depth of field. So I decided to just embrace the chaos, and I shot that at like 1/30th of a second, 1/60th of a second, at the fastest, but I think probably closer to 1/30th. Just handheld, trying to, time it with my breathing and not move too much. And I got several really good shots, and just let the drumsticks and the drummer's motions do all the work. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you, Plump Weasel. Appreciate that. Hey, Patrick Richards. Is there any safe way to clean the faceplate from a brown face fender without risking taking off the print? I have an old tech tell me that even soapy water with a microfiber cloth will kill it. Well, yeah. I have done this many times, and the things you have to watch out for are most fender faceplates have a thin film. It's not a matter of losing the print. It's not like a silk screen like you would get with like an old Marshall, where even warm soapy water will take us, or even just too much sweat will take the silk screen off. But there is a plastic film on top of those old panels, and certain solvents interact with that and make it come up or bubble or go funky. So when I get an old Fender amp in, the things that I try first are a very soft, dry bristle brush. Um, if that's not sufficient, I will try a microfiber cloth with the mildest possible pressure. If that does not work, and what will probably give you the best results is spray some paper, some WD-40 on a paper towel, or drizzle it sparingly on the faceplate and just smear it with your finger all around. No pressure, just moving the WD-40 around and let it sit for 15 minutes. Now, this is with the chassis out because you don't want it to drip down into the grill cloth or anything. And then gently wipe up with a very soft, dry towel to remove the WD-40, and that will usually take all the dirt with it. At that point, if you need it to look prettier, then a microfiber won't hurt that surface, and you don't need a lot of friction. But the WD-40 is a solvent that has always worked well for me on those old Fenders. That's including down the old Tweeds with a chrome panel. Just very light WD-40 coating, just literally just moving it around with your finger, no pressure, and letting it sit. The place is a nice. The world is a nicer place after coffee. It could be a lot nicer still. I'm still waiting to see that scaffolding situation, but the coffee does help. Hey, Chris. So you got a deluxe reverb. It's hissy. Not happy with that. Rebuild your budget from parts. Where would you use shielded for this? Any wisdom for the rewire? Well, I've got a 67 twin over there that I just put some shielded grids in. Not that I would necessarily need to do that in a new build, but on this old twin, the wires from the volume pots and from the input jacks to the grids of V1 and V2 were very microphonic and hissy. The main culprit for hissy, aside from once you eliminate any bad components or bad lead dress in general, is the connection going to the V3B grid. So pin 7 of V3, not V3, V4, sorry. I was thinking Princeton, V4, which is where the reverb gets mixed in with the dry. That wire can sometimes benefit from being shielded, and it's a little bit trickier to do on a standard Fender layout, but it is worthwhile finding a method to do that. Make sure you have clean tube sockets and good quality tube sockets where you have good contact metal to metal. I've seen apps with cheap tube sockets. I don't know how budget yours is, where the pins are not really making full contact, and so you don't get real good connections, and you do get noise. And no amount of chasing resistors or components or wires will fix that. Sometimes you have noisy tubes too. So don't be afraid to roll tubes. Hey, Fluffy Dog, I'll get to your question when it pops up here. There, I see it coming. Yeah, I love that the way that the old Reds went with some time as well, Goody. Hey, Rob. Why are carbon comp resistors used in amps when they tend to hiss and drift? Well, I only use them when I'm restoring amps from the 50s and 60s. And as my stash is depleted, I will have to make that an option for clients for me to track down the old stuff because they're not being made anymore, and the availability and the price are going to go. The availability is going down, so the price is going up. And in that case, it's just originality for originality's sake. Now, I will say that in a Fender with good carbon comps, it's not noisy, it's not hissy. But over time, especially as they absorb moisture, they can become hissy. It does happen. I would not necessarily use them in a new build. they do have a certain character and certain distortion characteristics. Now, when I say distortion characteristics, I'm not talking about playing old Black Sabbath riffs through them. I'm talking about second order harmonics and all this fun stuff that's kind of a rabbit hole to get into here without anything to show you. But they do have a certain sound in certain points of the circuit, not in others. In other parts of the circuit, they're of no benefit whatsoever, or even as a detriment. But you can still get those nuances from a correct carbon film as well. Not maybe as much, or maybe not as randomly. Sometimes we like the random, but for the most part, it's nostalgia, or a sense of something being historically correct. I just hissed a lot. I'll try not to. I've got a de-esser on here, but it only helps so much. If the amp amplifies an AC signal from the guitar, hey Fluffy Dog, why is it that when the ground lug becomes unsoldered on my amp, the amp still played, but was static, like the ground was not connected to bridge? Because there is ground and there is ground. Depending on how the amp is built, some amps have one connection from the circuit to the chassis, and everything in the amplifier is on that circuit. Other amps have multiple connections, or more than one connection to chassis. So in that case, the chassis is both shield. Well, not both. Three things. It's going to be serving as shield. It's going to be serving as your AC ground and your DC negative. Those are three different functions that we call ground that the chassis provides. If you have an amp where all the connections to ground are made on the board to each other, then with it not connected to chassis, you still have signal negative, and AC negative, and you still have DC negative. You just don't have the shielding function. And so if you disconnect one ground connection to the chassis, the amp still works. It's just noisy, like it is when you're not touching the strings on your guitar or the bridge, etc. If you were to have a different amp, say a Fender, say the Princeton I'm looking at right now, and you disconnected all the ground wires from the chassis, then you would have no functioning amplifier at all, because you would have no DC negative and you'd have no AC ground reference, and the thing would not work. Because this filter cap should be going to chassis, as should the associated cathode, so they're making ground through the chassis as opposed to a trace on a PCB. Hope that helps. What are some of the other amp techs to watch besides myself, Brad, and Frank over at Forgotten Gear Restorations? Well, Jeff, I would say Chris over at Rift Amps does really good work. There's Stuart, UK Amp Repair and Lessons. I think that's the name of his channel, kind of, sort of. He does really good work. I don't agree with him on every little thing, but he does good work. There's Dr. Gear down in Australia as well, and Six does really good work, though a lot of his stuff is a little more towards the keyboard. He does amplifiers as well, but it's not all guitar amplifiers. What is his name? Your amp tech? I'm trying to remember his name. It's Chris. He's in Australia. He's in Western Australia. I think he's in Perth. And I think it's just Your Amp Tech, or I'm really bad about this because when I watch their videos, I'm subscribed to them. They pop up. I'm like, oh, there's Chris. Or this other Chris at Rift Amps. So those are guys I would suggest. But I have a feeling that you guys watch more amp repair videos than I do. So maybe some of the other guys in the comments here will have given you some other good pointers. I will admit it is hot as shit outside. I have switched to iced coffee for the time being. Petestliger. I'm not sure how the Pete Steger. Sorry, Pete Steger or Steiger. Sorry about that, Pete. I've mentioned the lack of capitalization makes some of the usernames a little bit tricky. Is Chris the in Sydney? I thought he was in Western Australia. I I'll be glad to be wrong about that. He's a really nice guy. Um, See, was hey, I love the phrasing of your question. By any chance, would you be British? Uh, is there a follow up to that? Uh, okay, continued. Taken apart, can't see anything obviously wrong. Sorry about the character limit here, guys. I know it's tough to get into these things. Well, I'm unfamiliar with your model of amp, so I do not know what specifically to look for. But very often, terrible noises may just be tubes. So um, one of the things I would suggest is taking out every tube but the output tubes, the phase inverter tube, and if present, a rectifier tube, and powering it on and seeing if it makes terrible noises. If it does not make terrible noises in that state, then add the preamp tubes one at a time until you can figure out, oh, the terrible noises come back when I put in this tube. It must be in this section. That at least gives you something to look at. I don't know that reference. Too close for missiles, I'm switching to guns. And yeah, I forgot my buddy Jace at Head First Temps too. John Hogg gave you that. I have a Carvin Nomad. Hey, Tom Haas. 4 EL84s, fixed bias. Why would they have used 56K grid stoppers on the power tubes versus 5.6K or 1K? What would the difference be if I replaced them with a lower value? 56K grid stoppers, you're going to have a little bit of loss of high end compared to a lower value. It's not going to be night and day, but you can drop those to 10K, 1K to 10K, and see what you think. But if you want to put in some 5.6Ks or some 1Ks, the only real benefit to having the grid stoppers there typically is that they keep the tube stable, they prevent oscillation, and they can keep some hash kind of noise from being amplified. Once you get to a certain level, say 47K or larger, you will begin to hear a lack of highs, but it's not like it's putting a blanket over the amp. It's just like, oh, it's very slightly darker. Now, if you put like a 470K, it's like, well, that's dark. But I cannot think of any safety reason why you could not change out those grid stoppers. Ooh, you're not supposed to have that there in LA. You're supposed to be like always 70 and very, very smug about it, Wes. Hey, stuck in the bit. Ah, you got an FM2. Yeah. Well, um, by the time I'm done, it'll be too late. So you go catch some. Well, I guess it's already too late. You're, what, 6 hours ahead of us right now, or 7 hours? Yeah, the sun's gone down. Hey, Sash, having trouble finding some sheet metal to act as a chassis shield lid inside my 5150 head shell. Yeah, go to Home Depot or Lowe's and go over to the roofing section, and they sell aluminum flashing, which are sheets of thin aluminum, as the name implies. Be careful, they will cut the bejesus out of your fingers. They are very sharp on those edges, but get those. Go to an art store, get a large cutting mat, get a stainless steel yardstick or meter stick, depending on where you're at, and a utility knife with replaceable blades, and be ready to sacrifice one of those blades. But you can measure out what you need the thing to be. Say it's like 18 by 6.5. Mark it up with a Sharpie, put it on the cutting mat, or old wood table if you want to sacrifice a table. Put the metal down on that, and use a square to get right angles if you need to, whatever you need to do, and just put the ruler down to cut against, and like one light pass followed by two heavy passes with a fresh utility blade will cut that metal. And I suggest wearing some workman's gloves so you don't slice the fuck out of yourself. At which point you can staple it to the chassis, which many people do, or you can go get some 3M or Wildwood, or not Wildwood, Weldwood, or etc. Spray contact adhesive, spray it on the back of the aluminum and on the surface it's going to go to, and let it sit for 5 minutes and put it in place. Now be careful when you do that. You've got one shot. It's like that awful Hamilton song. You got one shot. So, because there's no takebacks. You get it laid up. You get it exactly right the first time. But that's the way to put that in there, have it rock solid and professional looking. It's not expensive. It's just a pain in the butt to work with. Thank you, Uncle Daddy, which sounds awful if I use my southern accent. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. 20 pounds. Very nice. Any downside to shielding the first grid or two anyway? No, there's no downside to it. People talk, oh, shielding robs you of highs. No. If it's done properly, and especially if you're using a telescoped shield, there's no downside to it. People are like, man, shielding ruins my signal. And then they plug in their guitar cable, which is shielded. It's their guitar cable, which they paid extra money for because it's unidirectional. They can hear the difference in an AC signal that goes both directions simultaneously. 2 potential points to look at. Is it worth going for a valve amp thingy to replace the session circuit? I'm pretty sure Pete's British, either that or a serious Beatles fan. A fiendish thingy. I don't know the value of the old Sessionette, and I can't tell you whether or not a tube amp should be in your future, but or a valve amp, yeah, definitely UK valve amp or Australia. I suppose anywhere in the Commonwealth, but here, for most players that would be worthwhile. But I don't know, maybe the Sessionettes or the Session's really worth it. I don't know that amp. I'm sorry. Working on a roof 4 hours yesterday. Oh my God! Watch out for heat stroke. I spent a summer doing concrete work back when I was younger and capable of doing such things. And man, we get loopy out there in the heat, and roofing's even tougher. Ouch, goody. I've not worked on an Alessandro, but I've seen the insides of them. I've no criticism whatsoever of the work that I have seen. Actually, no, I did have an app that his shop had done some mods to that I had to do some other stuff to, but I don't remember the details, and it does not. What I remember of it does not look like what his current work standards are. Now, it's also possible that he had a junior member of, whoever his employees were, miss something, or it's possible everything was great and then the app just hit like 37,000 potholes between the day they worked on it, the day I got it in. So I have no negative opinion of Alessandro's stuff. Hey, T. Partain, got a PRS Sonzera version 2. Would using a brown box at lower voltage extend the life of this lower quality amp? Thanks, Tony. No, not really. There are other things in that amp that are going to fail. I mean, technically, you'll have longer valve life. Sorry, I'm still talking to the tube life. We really need to find a consistent thing, and valve does sound nicer than tube. Anyway, it's not worth. If you have a brown box, it's fine. Use it. Your tubes will last a little bit longer. The amp will run a little bit cooler. It'll fail for other reasons. The Sanzera is not a very reliable amp. I'm sorry, I just have to be honest about this stuff. But if you were thinking about buying a brown box for a PRS Sanzera, no, 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 no. Don't spend $300, $400 to, at best, be get a little more life out of your tubes. You would not hear a benefit. I'll tell you though, human nature being what it is, including my own, if you spend $300, $400 on a brown box, you will hear a benefit. Oh, it sounds so much better with that. Even if you forget to turn it on, as long as it's there and you think it's connected, you will. I'm not saying you, I'm saying anyone. Oh, wow, listen how good that sounds. I mean, the Porsche that's at the Kroger parking lot, it carries groceries so much cooler than my VW. Or the people in those silly monster trucks all over town. I assume people already know about Colleen and Uncle Doug, so I was trying to give some shout outs to some others, and I'm sorry that I forgot Jason at head first. Atco, New Jersey, home of Eddie and the Cruisers. Well, smoking hot, so walk on the dark side, man. Oh, it was a Top Gun reference, Chris. Okay, that's why I didn't get it because I have not. I think the last Tom Cruise movie I saw uh, was Legend. It was not good. I never enjoyed his stuff, and then he got to be everywhere. I don't watch Tom Cruise movies. I don't watch DiCaprio movies. Uh, so sorry for everyone else. I especially don't watch Tom Cruise military propaganda movies. I'm a low battery on my keyboard. That could be bad. What can I do? Just a second. Power bank. Second, hook this up so the keyboard doesn't die midstream. It only takes about 15 minutes to charge it, but I forget. All right. Oh, it's solid state. No, no. All people, even those who use solid state amps, are welcome, especially Brits. We almost have the same language. So um, I cannot tell you whether a valve amp would be of benefit to you. I would say play as many apps as you can and judge for yourself. But if you just do all that and you decide to get a Katana or a, a some modeling system, that's fine too. As long as it makes music, as long as it suits your need and doesn't get your needs, doesn't put you in huge amounts of debt and doesn't get you evicted, it could be the right amp for you. Hey, Anthony, thoughts on the AC34HH? Hand wired, made in China. China. Okay, the Heritage. Yeah, avoid. They are so badly built. They look the part until you look at them because they look like it's an eyelet board or a turret board. But if you get in there, you see that the board is like two, maybe two thumbnails stacked on top of each other thick. So it's really flexible. And that all the turrets are just turrets that have been soldered to PCB pads, and they're only held on by wave soldering. So as soon as you try to desolder anything from a turret because it needs service, oops, it tore the pad off the board. The hand wiring by which hands I say it sounds like it's a joke. It's not. Those are really horribly built amps, and they're not reliable. Do not waste your money on them. Go buy a new or used AC30 Custom. If you can swing it, get the one with the blue. It's a much better amp than anything that they've used, that Vox has made since 1969. Yeah, vintage guitar amp, guitar teacher. That's the guy. Ted, thank you, Ted. Wow. That's amazing because my dog tends to tune me out. But she does like to fall asleep when I'm talking, so I guess I do have a way. Last night, I was stuck on the couch. We were watching Luther. Speaking of the UK, we were watching season 3, episode 1 of Luther, and we just had dinner. And Nikki asked me, basically, it reminded me it was my turn to take the dishes to the kitchen, even though I cooked. I'm not sure how that was fair, but I said I'm sorry, I can't, because our dog was lying down and her head was on my shoe. So I was there for the duration. So what's your dog's name, James? Mine is named Bella, but her full name is Bella Bambina. Because my wife and I love Neil Finn, and only afterwards did we realize that everyone was naming their dogs and children Bella from those stupid Twilight movies. If I had known that, I would not have named her Bella Bambina. Because Twilight. But she'll be my glass of water. That makes sense to fellow Crowded House fans. And thank you very much for the compliment, James. Hey there, Andy. Thoughts on Fender Super 62 reissue? Hey, Larry, I've not tried that one. I've not seen pictures of it. I don't know whether they're building it like the 65 series or building it like the Pro Reverb reissue that they've got out now, which is actually a well-built amp. Is not a reissue of a Pro Reverb. So until I see the insides, or better yet, have one in, I don't have an opinion on the Super 62 reissue. I will say, having played many actual 62 Supers, and I've got a 62 concert here right now. It's not an amp that I would buy. I think it's a very cool one or two trick pony. Other people love them to death. So, if it's built well and you love the sound, it could be great, but I don't know if it's built well. And I don't know if they got it right. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. The drive belt broke this morning on the mower. Well, that's not bad luck, Andy. That means you got to get out of mowing the grass. This son of a bitch had to go buy a new blade for his mower and uninstall the old blade and reinstall it, and then I had to change out all the air filters and the spark plug and all that and put new gas in it, and then mow the grass twice because it rained so much and it's been so hot that the grass just thinks it's in like Panama or something. So the young age of 58. Well, you are ancient. You got 3 years on me there, Pete. Is it Steiger or Steger in your neck of the woods? Hey, Greg Brown, seeing different ways to run heater wires, specifically a 5E3 amps, along the bottom of the chassis perimeter, risen up in the air, across the tube socket, etc. What's your suggestion? Well, it's going to be everyone's favorite answer. It depends. When I showed the Uncle Larry 5E3 a couple weeks ago, I'm looking at it. It's right there because the owner hasn't picked it up yet. And P2P amps. Mike did the heater wire up in the air like you'd find in a deluxe reverb. People are like, "Oh, it's awful. It should be vintage correct." I'm like, "Well, vintage correct would be only having one side of the heaters wired at all, the other side just going to ground, which was crappy." So I'm glad that he did a better job, and it's fine with them up in the air. There's a million Fenders from 61 on that had them up in the air. There's no problem there. If you want to lay them down against the chassis the way Lupe did, that's fine too. It gets some more, as long as the grids are dressed away from them. Now, like I mentioned in that video, they do collect dust, and if you have a liquid spill, it gets out of the way of the other stuff, but it puts it in a place where you get a lot of dirt, and especially when people try to use 18 gauge wire for wiring an old 5A3, it gets really hard to do. In an amp where you are building it for the first time and can have control over the orientation of the 12AX7s, I like to leave the gap between 1 and 9 towards the outside and run the heaters down the middle there. So the grids are on the side. And if you look at the AC50 video from a couple weeks back, the last one, the most recent one, You can see that's what I did, though it's running along the length of the chassis, just to keep the grids away from the heaters. So whichever way you want to do it is fine. Cheat code, if you have an amp which has a Schmidt or a long-tailed pair phase inverter, so deluxe reverb, twin reverb, most Marshalls, from the power tubes and the phase inverter are all inherently humbucking, so you don't have to worry about your lead dress on the heaters for those tubes as much. Everything after the phase inverter, yeah, you can still twist them together because it keeps them neatly in place and gives them some additional strength for longer runs, but there's no benefit as far as noise reduction. So that's how you look at like an SLO, and the heaters on the 6L6s are just wired straight to each other in two different lines. People are like, how did they get away with that? Well, it's a humbucker. Mike Saldana realized that. We listen with our eyes and our wallets. What is my opinion on a Jensen C10Q? Just ordered one for my 5-watt amp, 6H2N and 6NSC tubes with volume and full stack EQ. I don't have a problem with C10Q. It's a little bit bright at first. It should settle in pretty well. Would not be my wouldn't be my first choice, but I would not tell a client, you've got to change this. First of all, I don't watch Tarantino movies because I've already seen the movies that he emulates. So I don't, and I don't like Scorsese. So why would I watch those movies? Scorsese movies always have character pastiches. This is an archetype, this is an archetype, this is an archetype. I know this is an unpopular opinion. I think his lighting, his choice of directors of photography is fantastic. His shot setups are fantastic. His creative ideas as to how to visually get across information are fantastic. And he has worked with some great actors. Trouble is he keeps working with the same 5 actors again and again and again. But his scripts, his characters are never there. They're just sketches. Let's see. Thoughts on GEC KT66 tubes? Well, my thoughts are they're like round from one direction, but kind of long from the other direction. They should be pretty shiny. They might be silver shiny up top and clear shiny on the rest of it. If they work, they work. I don't have any, nothing to scare you with, nothing to give you glowing recommendations. There are so many companies out there that are trying to sell you that this thing that costs a lot of money is the only thing that could possibly do your laundry or whatever, make you look cool. Within pretty good margins, tubes work or they don't. They sound like they're supposed to sound or they don't. People get hung up on stuff. I guarantee you, and I'm recording stuff very high quality. If you listen to the 4K, regular 4K videos with good speakers or headphones, not the live stream, but the regular videos, you would not be able to tell if I was using a Tungsol preamp tube or whether I switched it to, say, an old RCA 7025 that I've got, or a JJ. And I've done these tests, and in the room, people cannot tell. They might say, something feels a little bit cooler about this, but they're not going to say, oh, I hear the characteristics of a JJ, or I hear the character. Now, people are, right now, there's a million guys sitting in their mama's basement typing away all the things that they hear, that, especially about the home stereo systems. There's an entire industry of selling and swallowing bullshit. And I should be capitalizing on that instead of criticizing it, because I could make a lot more money, but I just can't bring myself to do the cognitive disconnect necessary. Can I explain negative voltage in an old fuzz pedal? Okay, let's see. There are transistors which are positive, and there are transistors which are negative. They need 1 voltage to be to work as strongly as possible, and they need the opposite of that voltage to work for the other half of the waveform, and they need half of that voltage to be neutral, to be nothing, silence. That's what they also bias to, is to the half voltage. Now, you can either have a power supply that goes, say, one of my old pedals, plus 15, negative 15, and then ground is the half voltage. And so you can swing up to plus 15, you can swing down to negative 15, but 0 is ground. That's a bipolar supply. That's with op amps or using 2 transistors to create a circuit. If you're just using 1 transistor, you still need to have a full voltage, an opposite voltage, and a half voltage. And so if you have a NPN, negative polar transistor, then your maximum is going to be a negative. Let's say it's negative 9 volts. You could do positive 9 volts for its opposite and ground as its half reference. But what most people will do is they'll say, all right, negative 9 volts in a pedal is its maximum. Ground is the opposite. And we create a negative 4.5 volts to be our neutral. And that's what we bias to. So we have our 3 voltages, negative 9, negative 4.5, and ground, 0. And so it swings positive up to negative 9.5. Well, it's swinging negative up to negative 9.5, then positive to ground, and back and forth. That's how that works. Or you can use a positive transistor, a PNP, in which case, instead of having negative 9, negative 4.5, 0, you want to have 9, 4.5, 0. Hopefully that helps. So depending on the transistor that you have, and the earliest transistors were negative, the charge built into them was negative, so you would use a negative supply. That's why you have old fuzz faces. You cannot use a wall wart unless you get an adapter, or you'll blow the thing up. Jamie Jameson, I'm glad and sorry to know that you are in the same Cool Bella named dog reference and is stuck in a bunch of sparkly vampire idiots. So Bellatrix, are you naming her for the Latin or for Bellatrix Lestrange in Harry Potter? Come clean. Harry Potter is still a million times cooler than Twilight. How do I know when tremolo, tick, and a blackface Pro Reverb or other Fender is lead dress or something else? Well, usually ticking is the roach, which needs a cap bypassing it, and more of a thudding or general noise is lead dress. Basically, lower frequency stuff, especially if it's a thumping, that's lead dress. If it's a really high pitched, I can't really do, but that's the electronic discharge across the roach. Adding that cap helps. Hey, Kevin Duck, down there in Franklin. I like going to Franklin. I need to go over to Franklin again next time I'm in that neck of the woods. What brands and models of reverb tanks would I recommend for a Fender Deluxe Reverb kit? Well, I've just ordered a Surfy Bear tank for this Princeton, and I'm going to give them another shot. Now, the Surfy Bear tank I tried the first time, the Super Reverb sounded really good. As far as I know, it has not failed, but it is built for Surfy Bear by Accutronics, and it seems to be built the same way as far as the construction. And I don't have great expectations of its longevity, though I'd love to be wrong. But the owner of this Princeton here said he wanted to try one, and I said, I'll be glad to. It's going to sound great. It may or may not last, but you may have to replace it every 3 years. The reason I have to get it is because his Princeton, which is relatively new, has a dead Belton Accutronics stock tank because they fail. The second best option as far as sound, and the best option as far as reliability, without going out and buying a new old stock Gibbs or Accutronics from the 60s or 70s, which can be pricey, is the Mojotone medium decay tank. Now, both the Mojotone medium decay tank and the Surfy Bear are sold as medium decay, but they are emulating the sound of the old long decay of a reverb tank that you'd find in an old 60s Fender, the Gibbs and the Accutronics. Those were long decay, but their actual decay time is closer to a modern medium decay. And if you get like an MOD or Ruby or Accutronics 2-spring long decay tank, which is supposed to be what was on an old Fender, it's much longer decay and it's much darker and unpleasant sounding. So I would recommend the Mojotone medium decay 2-spring, or the wait and maybe we'll try the Surfy Bear. It's an $80 tank, $90 for shipping if you're in the United States. So it's an expensive option compared to about $35 for the Mojotone. But we were getting one in, and you'll hear it very soon. And I'll compare it to an actual early 70s Gibbs, or it's not Gibbs, sorry, Accutronics that I have. We'll see how it does. Ooh. Why was he storing his vinyl in a shed, though? I guess, I mean, you don't get the heat we do, but you still get cold. Yeah, V4 pin 7. Yeah. Well, the main thing to do on that, Kurt, is to remove that wire and run a shielded wire from the 3.3 meg 470K to 20K junction to V4 pin 7 and that V4B, and that will probably take care of that. It's also possible sometimes that you have tube sockets become microphonic. You know that. Try the shielded wire first, because you can temp that in and see if it helps before you do anything drastic. Hey, Suamela. Sorry, I try to get all the names right. It's the lack of punctuation more than anything else. Your problem is most likely old caps, old electrolytic caps. The stage that mixes the dry and the wet in that twin, much like other Fenders, there's two stages that share an electrolytic capacitor bypass cap across the cathode resistor. So both triodes use a shared cathode, and without a full bypass, they're going to have feedback to each other. And so if that cap goes bad or is missing or is just beginning to fail, you will get feedback. If that cap were absent entirely, you would have horrible feedback. So get your amp, have all the electrolytics replaced. When one's bad, they're all close to it, and that's going to solve your problem. And unused for 20 years, that means those caps have had 20 years to dry out. Doesn't surprise me in the slightest. If you want to, you can just change out that one capacitor just to see if I'm right, but I am. And it could also be some other caps contributing to that. So Best bet is to recap it. It's from what, 1991, 92, or 80. A Red Knob, the twin, was probably 87. I remember 87 when those came out. So I mean, it's been a hot minute. Hey, Dustin. Thanks for joining us, Pete. Go back to your nest away from all the people, the live people stuff. I gotta say, I have not seen Pacino do anything good since like 1975. Was he Dog Day Afternoon and the Godfather 1 and 2, and then just like he's a he went to self caricature. I don't get it. I've not seen Heat, so maybe it extends to like 80, 81. Hey, free and fighting. Any reservations on replacing the 6L6 tubes with EL84s using the Yellow Jacket 8 to 9 conversion system and the Hot Rod Deluxe 4? Also want to replace the V1 tube with the 12AY7. We'll go for the 12AY7 immediately because it's cheap and sounds much better. And you can even put a 7025 in V2. And if you want to complete the package to get lower gain and a nicer sound, you can put a 12AT in V3 in that amp. I would not do the Yellow Jackets with the EL84s because the load that a pair of EL84s wants to see are not going to be anywhere close to the load the output transformer presents. I think you'd spend $60 on tubes and $90 or so or whatever on the Yellow Jackets, and then say, well, it's quieter, but it doesn't sound very good. You've got a master volume option should you choose to use it, and this is where I'd spend your money. If you're looking for a lower volume version of that amp, either make or buy one of those things where it's just 100K volume pot in a little box with an input jack and output jack and a knob, and you stick it in your effects loop. People sell them on eBay and Reverb for the Deluxe and Hot Rod series. The Hot Rod and Blues Deluxe and DeVille's and all that. Sticks in this, send and return your effects loop, and then you have a master volume. You probably get much better use out of that. It would cost a hell of a lot less because a pair of EL84s driving the load that was designed for a pair of 6L6s, it's not going to be ideal. Hey, Greg Brown, difference between a pre and post phase inverter master volume. Well, there are a lot of differences. I'm going to give you the thing that's most important. And there are amps which have a lot of gain in the preamp, in which case turning the level of the preamp down before the phase inverter is fine. You turn the master volume down, which is feeding the input of the phase inverter, and that amp sounds much the same as it did with the master volume on 9 o'clock as it did in the master volume on 3 o'clock. That's fine. In fact, some people like that because it stays out of the negative feedback stuff, doesn't affect the presence. Your output stays the same at all times. Example of that done well would be a Friedman BE100 or 5150 or the Soldano SLO that the 5150 is a copy of. There are other amps, though, where the phase inverter is a big part of the sound of the amp's overdrive, say a Marshall JTM45 or Super Lead. And if you put a master volume before the phase inverter, or an AC30, as you turn that master volume down, the amp cleans up. So you dial in a really cool solo tone. That sounds great. It sounds just like Page. And you turn it down, and all of a sudden it's ding, 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 ding. It's all cleaned up. all your gain is gone. And that's where a post-phase inverter master volume helps, because you still have the phase inverter distortion, which is a big part of the total overdrive character of an amp like an AC30 or a Marshall Super Lead or J245, et cetera, et cetera. So horses for courses is, in general, I prefer the post-phase inverter because it will work as well on a high gain beast as it does on a lower gain amp that needs a phase inverter. But there are compelling reasons in some modern amps to use the master volume before the phase inverter, because you may not want to have any variation in your feedback circuit as you turn the post-phase inverter master down, because you're dealing with like a resonance control and a presence control, and if those change at different rates as the master turns down, the sound gets wonky. You know, it's also simpler to a standard pre-phase inverter master volume is much easier to implement. It's not that the post is that difficult to implement, but it is more complicated. Oh, there's nothing wrong with naming dogs after Latin words. I've always wanted to get a dog and name her Gloria Mundi. Sick. Gloria Mundi. Leave out the transit. You know, that's my Latin joke for the day. All one of you are laughing hard. I rather liked Bellatrix Lestrange in Harry Potter. Thank you, Greg. I see that. I tried to read The Golden Compass. I did not enjoy his writing style. I see why people do. I see why people love those books. And I think if I were reading them at 14, I would be very impressed by them. Reading them I read them as an adult, and I don't know. We approach things differently. It's a shame that the movies made such a mockery of what he was trying to do. But I thought his writing was, what's the best way to put it, more ambitious than he could deliver on. Intellectually, I wanted to like them. I was prepared to like them. So. Hey, Mac Powers. I don't know why Peavey did that circuit in the Classic 50 and the Delta Blues and the Classic 30. What I do when I get one of those in is I replace them with individual 1Ks. So it comes with 200 ohms because they're copying Vox, and I send it home with 4 1Ks because it was dumb. It's cost saving and part saving, but really, couldn't you have done that a slightly different way? Maybe they just weren't very good at doing the boards, and they realized they couldn't squeeze in 4 without redoing the layout, and they didn't have the budget, and they figured this would be good enough. I don't know. But the main issue with Classic 50s as far as failure are not those resistors. It's the ones in the droppers in the main power supply, especially on the Classic 30 and the Delta Blues, because they just roast that little board that they're on. But on the Classic 50, right tucked behind the series filter caps for the reservoir and screen nodes, there are 2 tiny little resistors in series that are like 3rd watt 1K 10Ks in series. They always burn themselves up, and they're really hard to reach because they're behind and underneath a bunch of large capacitors, and they're always covered in that stupid glue that they used. But they burn up, and I don't know why they chose such a comically underrated resistor for that. Ah, thank you, NT. Appreciate that. Shatner-esque, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Well, first of all, the Joker is a piece of shit. Oh wait, you're okay. Wait, you think of Nolan's use of the Joker in The Dark Knight? Okay, that was good. Okay, I thought you meant the that awful movie with Hair Lip Wood Eye. Um, but yeah, Pacino gets Shatner-esque. Is the best way to describe it. Bright switches. Is it normal for them to buzz when your hand is flipping them, even when just touching the plastic? Not a problem during playing, but is that a symptom of failing switches? Um, Depends on the amp. Um, Normally, you should not have a buzz if you're, say, if it's a Fender Twin Reverb, or etc. You got to hit the bright switch. There shouldn't be a buzz because you are on the other side of the chassis, which should be shielded. Do you have a two-prong conductor on your cable by any chance? If you have a two-prong conductor, your amp is not shielded, and that is one of the symptoms of having a non-shielded chassis. It's also possible you have a faulty ground in your. If you have a three conductor, you could have a faulty ground connection or a break in the wire, or someone broke off the ground lug so they could plug it into a wall that didn't have a three-prong outlet. But that symptom you're describing tells me that your chassis either is not shielded at all or is only partially working. And that's exactly the kind of symptom you'll get if you have a bad ground or lack of shield. It has nothing to do with the switch. Well, this is not a flex. I think you guys are unsurprised to know this about me. I was reading college level by the time I was 12, so I was reading Beverly Cleary in fourth grade, and I did like all the Beverly Cleary and the Judy Blume, and I even liked Encyclopedia Brown until I realized it was the same story every time, kind of like Scooby Doo. On that note, we are almost caught up, and I need to use the facilities and get some more coffee. So when we come back, we'll get back to Pete Stiegler, who did not leave. Dirty liar. He did not leave. He's resorted to hanging out with us live humans again. Thank you, Pete, for coming back, and you are, of course, welcome. For those of you new to the stream, at the top of each hour, we do 3 hours typically. At the top of each hour, we do a 7-minute intermission. You can go get a sandwich or some snacks, or go to the loo, whatever you need to do. See you in a few. Sorry I'm late. Nikki made a fresh pot. And I lost track of time. The song I named Bell after, Italian Plastic, by the way, was actually written by Paul Hester. I didn't know that Paul wrote that. Another reason I miss the guy. I thought that was Neil because Neil sang it with such conviction, and given the time period, he was doing a lot of weird stuff like Weather With You and Private Universe, a lot of in-jokes seemingly, so I figured it was just part of his oeuvre. Anyone else been enjoying all the live Rush performances coming out this week? It maketh me happy. I know I'm not the only one. Though maybe the main one. Makes me want to put some fresh strings on the red one just to see how much is the strings. Though these MHS pickups have a little bit more than those T-tops. Though the T-tops sound very nice as well. Does your 335 iced tea burst finishes look like that on the camera? Mine has got a faded tea burst. And this one has got faded cherry, though the fade in this case was, this was dark cherry when it was new, and this is the actual fade. Not as much as the 50s Les Pauls would fade, but it is pretty. Makes me want to play Johnny B. Good. I don't get to do that screenshot very often. Wish I could do it every day. Just as objects of beauty, it'd be nice to have both of them. But the red one's got to go home. Any experiences with a 6SJ octal pentode tube? Could there be enough gain to sufficiently drive a long-tail pair phase inverter using a 6SL7, considering an early AC15-ish circuit topology using octal tubes? Yeah, I mean, one of these? Yeah, I've got experience with these. I would not use these. They take up a lot of real estate. They're really prone to becoming microphonic. I'll show you what I would suggest. Let me find which bowl of preamp tubes it's in. I'm having to find it because I always forget the numbers. Here we go. I don't remember letters and numbers in random strings. But this is a pentode that was used a lot in Gibsons. Sounds every bit as cool to my ears as an EF86. Less prone to microphonics. 5879 Novel. It's a Novel pentode. Sounds great. Not quite as much oomph maybe as an EF86, but that can always be adjusted. Unless you just are burning to use hard to find tubes, I would not do the octals. I do Novels. But yeah, I have experience with them. Oh, yeah. It's a pretty obvious joke. It's not at all accurate, but I understand why people are making it. I might have skipped some people's comments. I was make sure. Hey, Pete, blame the whiskey. All right. The cab of my old amp is a Celestion G12K85. The cab speaker seems to be the biggest expense on an amp. The resale value of the Sessionette is around £250. It depends on what kinds of music you play and where you'll be playing them. You may need an amplifier. You may not need an amplifier. There are other options available to us today. So tell us what kinds of music you play and where you play them. Are you gigging? Are you just playing at home? And is home an apartment or is home a detached house? Because what you can get away with changes a lot. Do I ever read nonfiction science like Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion?
Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion.
No. I just sometimes I'll glance at articles about stuff, but it doesn't really interest me enough. The stuff I would really be interested in, I'm too lazy to do the legwork on, do the preparatory work. I read go take the equivalent of a minor in a subject to be able to understand the current thinking. Use AC10 C1 350. My opinion, that's about $300 too high. I would avoid the AC10 and the AC4. I think it's a piece of junk, and it doesn't sound very good. I've got a review of the AC10 C1 on my channel, in which I go through the circuit and show why it doesn't sound very good and that it never was designed to, and cannot really be improved, sadly. People will think I'm wrong, but I'm the one who actually plays. I've got a 64 AC10 right there. I've got a 65 AC50 there. I've had so many JMIs come through and modern Voxes. So, everyone's got an opinion, but mine are like heavy, dude. I've not tried the Thornbucker in the neck, John. And I typically want very different things from a neck and a bridge humbucker. And an awful lot of people like, say, a Seymour Duncan Jazz in the neck. I've never cared for the Jazz. People like get the Jeff back in the bridge and the Jazz in the neck. I'm like, okay, I don't like that sound. But other people love it, so it's hard to pick ups for people. But yeah, it's a reasonable choice. You could. I don't think that the 57 Classic is a particularly good sounding PAF clone tribute, whatever. I think the stuff that they're doing now, like in my SG, it's got the current version, which is better to my ears than a 57 Classic. The MHS pickups aren't made by Gibson anymore. There's the Memphis Historic spec. That's what you have in the 335. And it's a nice sounding neck pickup, but it's, basically that little comparison you just heard, I've got good Gibson PAF styles in my 335, and those are T-tops in that 70 or 71 335. Have less output, a little more clarity, even though the strings are a little bit deader on that guitar. Best thing you can do is just play as many as you can and cross your fingers that they'll sound the same way in your guitar. Yeah, Burstbucker. That's what the new ones are. I've got 61 Burstbuckers in my SG, and I think they sound nice. Well, I'm not arguing with you, working player. I've played a lot of late 50s PAFs and early 60s PAFs and patents, and the sound is all over the map back then. There's not a hey, this is what a PAF sounds like. There's a range and there's certain characteristics, but for some people, it makes sense to go to throwbacks. For some people, it makes sense to get a used set of antiquities. I don't know people's budget or how strictly it must adhere to being an example of the thing. Um, there's a lot to be said for just a pair of Duncan 59s where you very carefully adjust the pickup height until you get it sounding as good as it can to you, and then you just forget about it and make music. Oh, I don't think I have that kind of influence on people on the market. If I did, I would have bought all the 5879s myself and then resold them. Brad, you should be asleep, man. You just finished your live stream of the Sydney Vibrant Walk, and that started at 3:30 a.m. my time. So I'll watch that later.
Where is the earth-shattering kaboom? There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
I love that shit, man. I
had to destroy Earth. It was obstructing my view of Venus.
Oh man, Hamilton, you were at the before the Frost recordings. That's awesome. Yeah, that was just fantastic. Probably mine is not too dissimilar. It was Elvis Costello and the Imposters at the High Tone here in Memphis. There's a DVD you can find of that show because the High Tone was a club about the size of my house, and their stage was about half the size of this room, and so all the attractions except Bruce Thomas. I can't remember who the new bassist was, but it was the drummer and Steve on keyboards from the attractions with Elvis Costello. Just four guys who've been playing rock and roll right for forever, showing everyone else in town how it was done, and in a small intimate club. And I was 10 feet from Elvis the entire time. Anyway, there's some recordings of that. I think that I was there on the Saturday night. They did two nights. I was there on the Saturday night, and they filmed the Friday night, or vice versa. Anyway, the night that they filmed, Emmylou Harris joined them for a song. I was not there that night, but seeing professionals play, just doing what they do in a small space, and it all worked, and they were using small amps because it was a small club, and they sounded fantastic. But man, that rhythm section. 23, yeah. It's a disgustingly long time ago. And it seems like a recent album to me. I was just thinking the other day, between that and not realizing that Paul had written Italian Plastic, I really miss liner notes. Even back in the days when CDs used to come with booklets. I understand why they stopped doing it because of cost and everything, and large packaging size and all that. But I used to know so much more about the albums that I had, because I could sit there and read along, and I would memorize every detail about certain albums. Hey, Borrowland, just learning about amps. Do you think a vintage amp in excellent condition minus original speakers should be a deal breaker? Nah, most original speakers are damaged or need a recone anyway. It is. Do you want to have a thing because it is a valuable collectible thing, or because it is a thing which serves a function? And if so, what service or maintenance is necessary to ensure it still serves that function? I think that's all there is to it. Let's see what, I don't think I even need an analogy. I think it just, if you want it to make music, it's capable of making music. And if the speaker, which is an electromechanical device subject to heat and the material degradation that happens, especially to paper and rubber over the decades, that was something that was designed to be replaced. That's the reason it's got nuts on the back of its screws. It wasn't permanently attached. Just change out the speaker for something you like, and make sure the amp's working well, and it's going to sound fantastic for the next 30 years. Home strummer with an apartment has zero budget. All right, here's what I recommend to you, Pete. If you have a Mac, download GarageBand. If you've got a PC, I think it's called Reaper, Reaper, is a free or inexpensive DAW for a laptop. Any laptop sold in the last 5 years will run either of those programs at least well enough for your purposes. And then get a plugin, which is free, called, I think it's Neural Amp Modeler. Yeah, Neural Amp Modeler. And the software I recommended will also have reverbs and delays and stuff, and just play around with that. Even if you're just sitting there listening on your laptop or with headphones, make music. Spend very little money on it. You might have to get an interface if you don't have one, but you can get a really good used interface for probably 70 pounds, maybe less, 50 to 70 pounds. How do I feel about unpotted pickups versus potted? Do I have a favorite unpotted humbucker? Well, I have potted, I have unpotted, and I have semi-potted, in which case it means I probably need to repot them. There are guitars that I can barely use in this space if the amplifier is within 6 feet. And there are guitars which work fine with it. I don't think that the ones which are potted sound darker or neutered, though there's a very slight difference in their response at high volume with certain amps. I like both. If you're recording a record, you have a lot of control and you have time to nuance things. So I would say if you're recording mostly or playing at home, unpotted is great. If you're going to go on the road where it has to be consistent and always work and not give you issues, and you've got a crew you cannot let down, because people are making their money off this venture, take it seriously. Use some potted pickups. No one's going to say, well, I really enjoyed the whole show, but I think it would have been a little bit better if the sound that I was hearing through the PA, which doesn't have any EQ attached to it all, might have been a little bit dark for my taste. Maybe he should have used unpotted pickups. I mean, my God, I can have a dark sounding guitar and I play in a venue and Dustin's the sound guy. He'll be like, man, that guitar sounds like ass. Bring up 8K. Well, there it is. Sits with everything. Everyone will think it's great. No one's going to know. So, but they're going to know if you have uncontrollable squeal. So, and it's not like unpotted pickups squeal and potted pickups don't. Potted pickups rarely squeal, but unpotted pickups don't always have unpleasant feedback, and sometimes they have very nice feedback. Do I have a favorite unpotted humbucker? Well, the great PAFs that I've played, not that I have not owned any, but the great PAFs that I've played were all unpotted. And they sounded great, and I've played them at high gain. Okay. Hey, Strumbum. Well, that's a deep subject. Basically, if you have one side of the heater is grounded, that's the cheapest possible way. You're not going to have a half voltage reference. You just have one side's got 6.3 volts, the other one's got 0 volts. That is the easiest way to do it for a builder. It's why you see it in Champs and some early Deluxes and some early Tweed Princetons. It is the worst way to do it as far as the sound of the amp. That's a unipolar supply. A bipolar supply where you have 3.15 volts and 3.15 volts with a reference to 0, forcing the 0 in the middle is the best way to do it. Now, sometimes that's done with a physical center tap to ground. Sometimes that's done with an artificial center tap. Not all power transformers that Fender used back in the day had a heater center tap winding. And Fender didn't bother speccing out a custom version of those transformers. They just used it, and they stuck the 200 ohm resistors off the lamp to ground. Voila. They have an artificial center tap. Other transformers that they used off the shelf came with a center tap for the heater supply, the filament supply. Fender used that. And an old Fender that comes in, which has a physical Fender center tap for the filament supply that's going to chassis ground, I lift that off the ground. I use some heat shrink tuck it away so it's not in use. I put in some half-watt 100-ohm resistors, because if something were to go wrong and you have a heater to cathode short or a heater to plate short, because these things can happen, especially with current production tubes. With the old setup, with the center tap physically wired to chassis, you could, before the mains fuse has time to blow, you can have the entire wire just char all the way down the line and into the power transformer. You have a dead power transformer. Whereas if you have the heater balance being made through the half-watt resistors and something goes wrong, and it goes wrong before the mains fuse has time to trip, instead of burning up your power transformer, you will char the fuck out of a 4-cent half-watt resistor. And it's real easy to replace it. And then life goes on. Nothing was permanently damaged. So that's the way I do it. Now, it doesn't need to be to ground. It can also be to a positive voltage supply, a DC voltage supply. But that's another conversation for another time. Restoring a 69 Bantam bass to flip. Do I think it's more sellable stock, or modding the bass channel to something more useful? I think it's probably more sellable if you just restore it and it's stock, and someone says, hey, it's a Fender Bantam bass and it works, cool. Because if you mod it, and someone has a problem with your mods down the line, you're responsible for that. You've got to support them, as opposed to just saying, hey, I've restored it. That's what they have always sounded like. Mods are a very subjective thing. Various tastes change. What sounds good to you may sound awful to someone else. They may buy it and want their money back, and they're like, man, I hate the way that thing sounds. It sounds like Van Halen. And you're like, yeah, I know, man, it sounds like Van Halen. And you're like, no, man, I hate Van Halen. And you're like, what's wrong with you? You hate Van Halen. Then there's a whole subject. Anyway, at the end of it, you still got to accept it back, and you've lost the shipping and you lost the time, and you may get bad reviews, if you're a seller. So just make it be a Bantam bass that's working the way it did in 1969. And then if anyone has any complaints, you can say, it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a Fender Bantam bass. TNT bass amps, man, those are some workhorses. Should be fixable. And while TNTs never sound great, they always sound loud. The main thing with a TNT is if the cab has a tweeter, turn off the tweeter and you can have a chance of getting the sound. Oh, that's pretty easy to do. Cool. Well, if you're just playing in your apartment, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to help people save money. I want people to enjoy making music, and I don't want people wasting their money. So for some people, the right amp is a 1966 Deluxe Reverb that's fully working. And for some people, the answer is, hey, I didn't even know that I could put GarageBand on my old Mac and just download this modeler thing, and ooh, listen, I've got a delay plug-in, I got an overdrive plug, and they're gonna have fun, and they're gonna make music with it. Will it sound as good as a Fractal? No. Will it sound as good as what you could do in a I've got a Royer over there. I mean, for context, now most of this gear is not mine, but some of it is. I've got the Uncle Larry 5E3. I got a 65 reissue Princeton, which has the Alessandro 10. I've got the 65 AC50. I've got my shop cab with the ET65 and the Veteran 30, which has a Royer R10 on it, hot rod amp. I've got a 67 or 68 basement to the right of that. I've got that 62 reverb unit there. I've got a 76-ish super reverb. I've got a Princeton on top of that. I got a Marshall thing over there. You got I got a concert over there, the 62 basement over there. I could continue the tour. With the 57 and the Royer and all these different amps here, I could do a record and sound better than any plugin in the world. But my God, the fact that I could just take this laptop and this with a little interface with me and travel and get pretty close in a hotel room, that's amazing. Yeah, latency is always fun. I'm not saying that it's a free lunch, but I'm just saying if you already got a laptop, you're ahead of the game even when it comes to being able to make music in your apartment. I have my hearing tested every few years, and I've lost some, but I still have up to about 16K accurately. I don't have any notches. That's the most important thing. I don't have any big gaps. And man, I'll have people come over here who just don't hear a thing. They don't hear it, or they turn up their amp and it's like, oh, that's bright. Or they're very sensitive to treble frequencies, and they've gotten used to playing where the amp is set very, very dark because they have an exaggeration. They've lost something, and so in comparison, everything sounds too bright to them. And I'm so glad that that has not happened to me. I'm very paranoid about that because a lot of what I do is due to the fact that I am young enough to still be able to hear things, but old enough to know what to do about it if it doesn't sound quite right. Oh, we all of us love bits and bobs in every hobby, whether it's guitar or tennis or hiking. You start off hiking. You start off wanting to just wander mountain trails and see nature sights, and then you're like, what is the best water reclamation? You get way down the rabbit hole, and you're like, what is the best X? What is the best Y? What is the best Z? And you're like, 100 years ago, no one used any of that stuff, and they still made it. We all love bits and bobs, but we need to keep the goal in mind with whatever our pursuit is. Any misgivings on modding a 75 champ? Not sure if I want to add digital or spring reverb. Would be changing the resistor on the bass pot. Also replace speaker with a 10-inch Alessandro. Well, the speaker is a good idea if you can fit a 10-inch in there. Most 75 champs, you barely have room to use any 8-inch, which has a suitable magnet. I'm not sure you're physically going to have room for a 10-inch Alessandro. The 15K resistor, changing that out on the bass pot, that's a no-brainer because that's a non-permanent mod. Don't worry about adding digital or spring reverb. That's you don't have the current available in the power transformer to add a tube reverb. And you'd have to add a transformer to power digital reverb, and then you'd have something that sound like digital reverb. Would sound like a bad digital reverb pedal. Here's the thing: a champ doesn't get that dirty. Go get a good sounding digital reverb pedal, put it in front of the amp, play. The 15K resistor, changing that makes total sense. If you can get to a larger speaker in there, that's fine. Or you can always just get a 1x12 or 1x10 cabinet and run the champ into it when you want to have a bigger sound than what you get with the 8. If you want to make severe mods to a champ, don't start with a 75. Just buy a kit and do whatever you want, man. Yeah, I use 100 ohm half watt flameproof metal films for the most part. Sometimes I use a standard metal film, in which case I'm just very careful about um, uh, air gaps. But Ted's got one right there listed for you. 100 ohm half watt safety resistors. I was about to do the same thing that Ted did. Now, they do cost more than a standard metal film, but, you know, they don't cost a ton. My thoughts on 66 Fender Super Reverb. One of the best amps of all time, especially if it has the original Alnico 10-inch speakers. Now, by that, I don't mean that they usually sound better if they've been reconed at some point, but man, that's one of the best amps ever made. 66 Super Reverb with the 10-inch Alnicos. Fantastic. The CTS ones. Yeah, CMF is one of the more expensive lines from Mauser. I think CMF is for industries that have to have everything certified to be within a certain range and tolerance. I mean, I rarely use CMF stuff in amps. So they make fantastic, not the flameproof, but the regular CMF make fantastic plate resistors in amps. They sound really nice. Scotland versus Haiti live at 2 a.m. I don't know what team you could possibly be rooting for there, Martin. I apologize to everyone who loves football, soccer as we call it here. It, I don't watch it, but it's not because I don't like football or soccer. I don't watch any sports. I'll occasionally watch a baseball game if I'm at someone's house and it's on. That's the only sport I can find interesting because I'm 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 free rambling because I've gotten caught up on the questions about amps. But with baseball, it's not a. I mean, it is a team thing, and there are coordination and cooperation between players for plays, but it comes down to a standoff between the pitcher and the batter. And so it comes down to two individuals testing each other, and it's psychological. And I know that the catcher has a role in that as well in terms of strategy. But at the end of it, every every at bat is two individuals psyching each other out and testing their abilities. And I like that. I like that you can actually have a every time someone's at bat, there's a new level of tension potentially, or a new level, a chance to say, "Wow, he smoked that guy," or "Look at that thing go." You know, how the hell did he get a hold of that? Um, Whereas football, it's just like watching army maneuvers, American football. And my God, every 10 seconds there's a new timeout because the rules are so Byzantine with American football. You know, they spend 30 minutes getting a yard and they've managed to get in 13 commercial breaks. It's painful to watch. Do I have a favorite Creedence Clearwater Revival tune? Well, while Fortunate Son is always sadly apropos to our current state of affairs, I gotta say, I always have just really loved. Have you ever seen the rain? That's just a beautiful, beautiful track. I love the feel of it and the way the organ comes in real slow into the second verse. But yeah, Fortunate Son is the most apt for these days. I mean, I reference Born in the Bayou a lot when I test tremolos because it's part of the sound in our subconscious, and it's easy to do an E7 while fiddling with a knob on an amp. But yeah, I think Have You Ever Seen the Rain would probably be the one I would choose. That's the one if it comes on the radio, I'm like, oh yeah, I love this one, as opposed to, oh, that one again. I'm not a huge Creedence fan, but I don't dislike Creedence. Would I do a reaction video for you and check out Charlie Crockett live at the Ryman? No, I'm not. I mean, no offense to you, Randy, and no offense to Mr. Crockett there, but I don't want to get into doing reaction videos. First of all, I have no idea how you make any money off a reaction video without getting demonetized and struck, and I don't want to put in the time to edit together a video that I would make no money on. I like money. Money's good, but I also know that most of the stuff that's at the Ryman, my reaction would not please the people who are interested in the music that is typically booked there. How do I feel about the Eagles, man? Just turn that shit off, man. The Eagles have some really great songs, and they have some really great playing and really great harmony. I've heard them all to death. But the main thing is that um, I just once you understand what a massive cock Don Henley is, it's hard to listen to it because I'm just like, oh, there's the asshole again. Um, I will check it out, Randy. I'll check out Charlie Crockett, but I don't do reaction videos. But yeah, I'm not an Eagles fan, but I can't. I can't take away from the things that they accomplished. Really good arrangements, really good songs, really good vocals, really good guitar parts, but just unpleasant people. Um, yeah. I mean, I grew up, all that stuff was new on the radio when I was a kid. I've heard it all my life. I know every lyric to every song I dislike by them. I know every freaking moment of every lyric. I've heard it a jillion times on AM radio, hot, sticky, vinyl covered bench seats in a air condition in a backwards facing seat of a station wagon with no air conditioning on AM radio. Did I mention that? Yeah, I mean, I know all that stuff. It's a shame that they are like, you want, especially when you're a kid, you want all the bands to be like the Monkees and they're all great friends and everything's fantastic. And then you find that, that's not realistic. But man, those guys took it to a new extreme of unpleasantness. And that's nothing against Joe Walsh, and there's nothing against, I guess they got, Vince Gill playing with him these days. He's a really nice guy from all accounts. And I'm sure that they pay really well and their per diems must be awesome. But, how many times are they going to do the last tour, this time we mean it trick? Yeah, and yeah. I don't like the way they treated Don Felder or Randy Messner, but 3 out of 4 Monkees agree. Are any Monkees still with us? Yeah, Don Felder is a fantastic player. As is Joe Walsh. Everyone in the band, with the exception of Don Henley on drums, was a really good player. Mickey Dolenz is still alive. Okay, cool. The lunchbox sales, man. I had so many cool lunchboxes. I wish I still had them. They'd be worth a lot of money. I had a Black Hole lunchbox in fourth grade. I had the Black Hole lunchbox. And I saw that someone was listing one on eBay for like $5,000. I'm like, who the fuck would pay $5,000 for an old lunchbox from 1979, 80, whenever that was? Yeah, I probably shouldn't say Don Henley's a massive cock on here, but I doubt his lawyers are going to bother to go this far into the stream. Yeah, don't use WD-40 on guitar pots. That's not the most harmful chemical that Joe Walsh has experimented with, but we can't all get lucky like him. I would suggest not putting WD-40 in any guitar pots or any potentiometers. Listen to him about about how to play. Don't listen to him about electronics or maintenance. Yeah, John, I think we're probably about the same age there. Still can't watch The Black Hole after seeing it in elementary school and having the actor get blundered by Maximilian. Yeah, that was, I guess, 1980 or 79. I know that when I had the lunchbox, I was in fourth grade, so that would be 81. So maybe it's 81. Some of those years are a blur. Regarding the Alessandro for 10-inch and a Champ, I cut the baffle and put an Allen output transformer. Even tried using a 6L6 with a bias resistor. That worked out. Okay, well, you can. I'm not sure that you're going to get a huge amount more out of a 6L6 versus a 6V6 with that power transformer, but you only met Eddie Van Halen twice. So 2 times you met him, 2 times he was a jerk. The 5th time, though, I've heard Eddie could have been awesome depending on the day or whatever. So you might have, if you had more interactions with him, you might have, one day might have fallen in love. But Don Henley has consistency. I can't imagine that those of us who watch regularly, who tune in regularly, who are on the sane side, would enjoy hanging out with Eddie or Diamond Dave back in the day. There are artists that one can enjoy their work without wanting to have breakfast with. Um, but and a lot of artists traditionally are kind of difficult people. I don't think that we'd want to hang out with Pablo Picasso either. But I think again, Don Henley takes it all to another level because uh, he has the ego of Pablo Picasso, but he ain't no Picasso. I think we're going to take our next intermission a little bit early. Um, yeah, Christopher, you basically turned that into a Tweed Princeton, or in between a Tweed and a blackface. Never meet your heroes. I've met some really awesome heroes. Um, I think part of it is as I get older, I've allowed them to be a little less heroic. But um, I'm going to take our next intermission a little bit early because I need to, and then I'll hang out with you guys to make it up on the last third. So see you guys in a little bit. And we're back. Let's see. Kevin Duff retracted this message, but maybe he's still here. He's got a Silverface Pro, no reverb. I can hear the reverb if I shake the amp. Everything else works fine, and the idea is where to start. Often it's a bad 12AU7 driver tube. In a Pro, it'd be V3. Because you're hearing the recovery. It could be a bad tank. It could be a bad cable. It's one of those things. Those are the places to start. So if you hear this, Kevin, there you go, Mr. Duff. Okay. He posted it twice by mistake, I guess. That's why he retracted the first one. Sorry. I see them in the sequence they come in. The G12K85 is a very tending towards neutral late 80s kind of speaker. It's not bad. It's not great. It's a very common find in an 80s amp. And there's nothing wrong with it if you like it. It's better than many other kind of stock speakers you'd find during the period. Hey, John, did my counter freeze? Are you seeing and hearing what I'm saying now, John? I guess if you're not, you won't reply to that. But I've never had the counter freeze before. It's possible that you lost you had a buffering connection. Thank you, Vinicius. Okay, making sure that everything's transmitting out there fine. The best PRS amp I've dealt with has been the DGT30, the David Grissom 30 watt, which is kind of Marshally, kind of Voxy. That's a really nice amp. I can't. I almost had to have been buffering on your end, John. I mean, not that my system is perfect, but given the counter CPU resources versus everything else that's going on here with the HD video and audio synced and all this stuff, I can't imagine that little counter and its display would freeze. If that freezes, I've got bigger issues. This is an odd one. This is the least number of questions I've had in a long time. Usually I'm really playing catch up, and maybe I've just bored everyone and people have stopped coming and asking questions. But I don't know. It's easier to keep up, certainly this way, and I can actually kind of participate in the live aspect of the chat better this way. So I'm comfortable with this, but I'm just wondering if I did something wrong. Hey, Daniel D. I'm not sure how that should be done, but recently picked up a 71 Les Paul Deluxe. It has original 500K pots. I measured 1.2 meg. Is this common, or did I measure wrong? I don't know how you measured it. In a pot like that, Les Paul Deluxe, the way to measure it would be to set the pickup selector to the neck position, and then measure from lug 1 to lug 3 on the volume pot for the bridge position, so it's out of circuit, not connected to anything else. It's not connected. Well, it's still going to be connected to the pickup, so you will get if you measure the pot in circuit, it's going to measure in parallel with the pickup. So if, say, your pickup's got an 8K DC resistance and you have a 500K pot, you're going to measure like 7.2K, something like that, 7.5K. You almost have to disconnect the pot from the circuit, from the pickup, to get a measurement of the pot, but you should never get 1.2 meg. It's possible that you measured from point to point that's not quite correct, or that you misread your meter, but it should be, typically you'd be reading between 6 to 9K depending on the pickup, if it's in circuit. and you'd be measuring 400 to 550K if you're measuring the pot by itself. No, I know we got 129 people here, but usually there's just so many questions piled up that I never get to them. And now I'm staying up on them, so maybe I'm just getting better at this shit. Have I already commented on the Fender cease and desist stuff? Hey, Sean, I have the past two streams. I don't really have much to say other than I think Beato covered the most important stuff. If Fender wants to sell more S-type guitars than anyone else makes S-type guitars, I mean, I think Fender needs to make better S-type guitars. And it's interesting to me that they haven't even touched the Telecaster side of things, but they should also make better T-shaped objects. Oh, the World Cup's happening right now? That would explain it. Sorry. I never underestimate the global draw. I just don't understand it. And that's not just the World Cup. I don't understand the World Series. I don't understand why people care about the Super Bowl. They're just games. But adults make odd choices with how to spend their time. Victor, you don't have to apologize to me. You live in what, Maui? If I were you, I'd be asleep on the beach too. I don't know if I'd bother with this little thing that we do here. Imagine the weather's much nicer there than here. Thank you, Lovecrafty. Well, I think there are a lot more Americans like me. I am certainly not that unique. I mean, other than my disdain for organized sports, there are an awful lot of us who did not vote for this nonsense, who do not want any more of this nonsense, and don't understand why we can't just end this. The closest parallel I can say is to you who voted Remain, and yet you got kicked out along with all the chumps. So it's been an interesting week or so watching politics on your side of the pond as well. I can't quite understand why everyone's resigning from Starmer's government, but it takes a lot less to get rid of your leaders than it does to get rid of ours. With Starmer, someone can just say, rumors say that he looks tired, and then he's gone. And then here, multiple crimes, multiple indictments, rape, treason, all this stuff, and he's still there. I think your system might be a little bit better. Hey, I'm glad you're liking that Tweaker 15, and long may it make you happy. Yeah, when you get into hi-fi, especially with concentric speakers, 6.5, I've got some Yamahas here with 7-inch speakers for the woofers, and then some tweeters. These are studio monitors, very different than an 8-inch speaker that's that much magnet in a very small cabinet that's not tuned. But 8-inch guitar speakers usually suck. Thank you, Free and Fighting. Appreciate that. Keith is a real good guy. He's actually. We did another video together, a live stream of about 2-3 weeks ago. So if you enjoyed the first one, go back and see the one we did about 2-3 weeks ago. Keith's a good guy. I'm glad that you enjoy your American Silver Sky. I cannot get behind the Silver Sky because they look like a Strat by Fisher Price. Every little thing that makes the Strat a beautiful thing has been changed just enough that it is no longer beautiful on the Silver Sky. I understand that they play great and they sound great, and if they make you happy, that's great. But there's something about the design of a Strat, there's something about the design of a Telecaster that's just perfect. and all that's been removed on the Silver Sky. And it seems to me that, I understand, but you could make the same playability and feature set and give it a different good design, as opposed to just making everything look like the Nerf version. Did I hear Coles talk to the Fender dealers trying to walk back some of the demands? No, I don't keep up with the industry stuff. It's, go to Phil McKnight's channel if you want to be up on industry news. This is the guitar industry does not interest me. Amps interest me, guitars interest me, music interests me more than any of that. Creativity interests me, but I'd rather rather read almost anything other than guitar industry news. Hey, Tango Tommy. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I wish Rick did more What Makes His Song Great. That's how I first found his channel. And that's the stuff that really blew me away. I don't know how at the time he got all those stems. I'm sure he had contacts who were supplying him. But I mean, the stuff he had access to is just amazing. And what he did with it and what he shared from it was just fantastic. And I also love his music theory videos, which I have benefited from a lot. I understand why people don't like him always talking about his book, but it is a business venture for him, and the content of his book, I've seen excerpts, is good information that you would normally have to go to Berkeley to get, or some other equivalent musical program. And for people who don't live in a major city where you can get an individual instructor, if you're out in a cabin in Montana, I think that's a great resource. But mostly, I really enjoy him breaking down the productions and him talking about chord theory and how everything moves together and voicing. I'm not so nuts about and I say this as your fellow old, if you watch this, Rick, hey, thanks for the cool videos. I watch this because I'm in your boat, but the old man shouting at clouds aspect, I don't care what's in the Spotify top 10 because it sucks. But better you than me, man. Better you than me. I imagine the DGT 15 combo must be pretty damn good, because I don't think that David Grissom would put his name on something that's bad. Grissom's been had a long-standing partnership with PRS, but he also has been very particular about what gets his, what's associated with his name, and the DGT guitar, both the American and the CE or whatever it is, are very SE are very good guitars. And the DGT 30 is a very, very good amp. I assume the 15 is quite good, but I've not tried one. Well, Scotland would have voted to remain in France if they'd had a vote a long ass time ago. Thank you, Daniel D. Appreciate you, sir. Your 66 Champ and 66 Princeton Tolex have become sticky. Well, Cameron, that can happen, especially if people have used the wrong solvents over the years. I would suggest going to a good auto supply store and looking at Meguiar's and Mother's products for vinyl restoration, because they sell specialty products for restoring old car upholstery. And the vinyl in car upholstery is very similar to the vinyl in the Tolex on our amps. And there are products which make that stuff get sticky and bad. There are products which make that stuff work very well. I am not an expert in such things. I've got some Meguiar's something or other and some Mother's something or other, and I cleaned up an old Princeton with one of the two, I don't remember which, about 6 weeks ago, and between that and warm water and a sponge, it worked really, really well. But don't use Armor All, don't use Windex, don't use even Goo Gone unless you're very, very careful with it. You can use naphtha, though, as much as you wish. But and never bring acetone near one. But especially if you have a car detailing shop in your town, if you were to just slip the guy $5 and say, "Hey, tell me what to get for my Tolex," they'll say, "Hey, this is what actually works, and here's what actually works that you can buy at AutoZone or Pep Boys or whatever, not Pep Boys, O'Reilly, etc. Whatever your local auto supply place is." But the stuff is out there. Hey, Hamilton, you're in Nashville. AC15 C1, my typical C1 improvements. Um, well, for the last several years, that would be 240. Now it'll be 300. My prices have gone up because everything that I have to buy has gone up so much. So 300 would, assuming it doesn't need any tubes, would get you an amp that would sound like what you want it to sound like and would be much more reliable down the very long road. In the short term, as in 10 years, the stock amp is usually pretty reliable. It's a really nice sounding amp. And shipping to Nashville on the chassis alone would be pretty good. Shipping the entire amp would get pretty up there. There's also, a lot of people going back and forth between Nashville and Memphis a lot. We could probably maybe arrange for something like that. Get in touch with me after shoot me an email. And I'll get in touch with you after the stream, Hamilton. I did not mean to ruin the Silver Sky for you, or did I? Best source for replacement 1 meg volume pot for Orange OR15. Having a hard time looking for it. Thanks. Well, you almost got to get it from Orange because Orange uses a really long split shaft pot, and that's not something that Alpha and other companies offer as a standard. It's not commonly used. So Orange had those made to their spec by Alpha or one of the similar companies, and they're going to have a whole bunch of them, and they'll probably sell you one for about $3 plus shipping. So contact Orange and say, hey, I need a replacement 1 meg volume pot for this model, and here's the serial number, and they're really good about that. Any opinions or suggestions for combining different size speakers in a custom box for a deluxe type amp for clean to mild overdrive for blues and rock? I've done it. It's kind of, I don't know. I did one where it was a 12 and a 10 and then a 15 and a 10 for a guy, and they sounded good, but I think this is we were talking earlier about how with any hobby you get caught up in all the what's the best this or what could I do, what are all the bits and bobs that are not the mains, actually what made you get into it in the first place. I think it'd be not a waste of your time and money, but it's certainly a sideways expenditure. I think a good sounding cabinet with matched speakers is kind of the standard for a reason for guitar use. I wouldn't go crazy on it. I just don't understand why they made the Silver Sky so uncool. It's just a very seriously uncool object. When we were in London, we went to the Design Museum, and they had all these objects up, mass-produced objects from the past 60, 70 years, things that just inherently looked right because design is a real concept. And the Stratocaster was on that wall. The Silver Sky would never be on a similar wall in terms of a design school saying, this is how you make an iconic design. It's just like it is. If the Strat is Art Deco, the Silver Sky is my first brutalism. Ugly. Well, I gotta say, before I was on YouTube, I had no idea that people gave a hoot about Joe Bonamassa or John Mayer's guitars and stuff. can't name a single song by Bonamassa, and the songs I can name by John Mayer, I've always hated. Now, they may be totally great guys, and they are very good players, but man, there's a million great players that no one's ever heard of, never will. But I don't understand. Maybe they just had YouTube channels before anyone else. I don't know. But man, there's so many great players. I was watching, Nick and I go down rabbit holes. Last night I was watching on YouTube 100 best songs in Germany from 1980. And of those 100 best songs, maybe 15, 20 were hits that had been hits in the United States or America at the same time, like Blondie, Call Me was on that list. But at the same time, there were a lot of stuff that was only a hit pretty much in Europe or in that case, at the time, West Germany. Much of which was awful, much of which was still 1976, because 1980 came later to West Germany than it did to the rest of the West, apparently. But what really struck me was how many really good singers and really good musicians were playing in bands that no one ever heard of afterwards. I'm sure that very few people in Germany know the people in those bands today. You can be really good and it doesn't matter. And you get really good enough to make it have like one hit single in 1980 in West Germany, and you still have to have a day job the rest of your life. And yeah, Papa used to be in this band that no one remembers. It's very strange. Man, Nena had that sick hook on that song, 99 Luftballon. That's a slamming track, but it is kind of like Safety Dance, It is like that's that track with that hook. But I know that Nena did better in Germany before and after than just that. But it is interesting to see. Hey, was if you think about what being a teenager would have been like in 1980 in West Germany, that would have been someone's summer. That every song, those songs would mean something to them. And to the rest of us, watching from a distance, 50 years later, it's like 40 years later, like, oh, isn't that kind of odd? That kind of puts everything that we love in context. You live in Oahu in the hills overlooking Pearl Harbor, and you didn't warn the fuckers? Thanks, Victor. He's not quite that old. Man, Parallel Series is way overrated in a two humbucker guitar. But I think it is a very good option for wiring a humbucker. Now, granted, someone's shouting at me right now, you can wire two single coils in humbucker mode. You can have two single coils like I tell you. You could do a series parallel. So basically, hey, I got a great big humbucker that takes up the entire body of the guitar. But I have not enjoyed that option on Strats and Tellys very often. But what I really do enjoy, and I'd show you, except it's way over there and I'm lazy, is taking a standard humbucker and switching it from series to parallel, which gives you a sound closer to a P90 or a really nice hot single coil. Hey, Daria, I enjoyed looking through your art on Instagram this morning. I appreciate you showing my photos some love, and I went through and looked at your illustrations. I only had a brief amount of time, but I'm going to go back and look through some more. Anyway, you have a question. Got a USA Strat, and the pickups produce a distracting background noise. The Guitar Tech 2, I said there's no grounding circuit problem. That's just how they are. Well, I would suggest for less noise while preserving the single coil character. As always, thanks. All right, let me switch guitars to show this. So let me this I'll show you. This is worth getting the guitars for. Just a second. One of them's in the other room. Almost ready. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. All right, now we're ready to show you. This is the K-Line Springfield, which has traditional single coils, as in they're going to act just like yours. So if I'm on the neck pickup by itself, there's some hum. If I'm in the middle by itself, there's some hum. If I'm on the bridge by itself, there's hum. If I go bridge middle, there's no hum. If I go neck middle, there's no hum. So in a pinch, just stick in position 2 and 4. But the other thing, when we go to the neck pickup, is that the rotation of the guitar in the room will affect the amount of hum. Less hum, the most hum. So most hum is on this axis, which means that the least hum should be here. So what you do is you're playing on stage. That's a little bit noisy. Now that's not always enough, because sometimes you're playing on stage and this is where you need to stand for it to be less noisy, but there's a Coors Light neon sign on the wall there. It's emitting a noise field being picked up in the pickups, and that's separate from the 60 cycle stuff. What you do then is use noiseless pickups. Very well shielded noiseless pickups will minimize the interference from Coors Light and other neon signs. But humbucker, nothing. These are stacked humbuckers. So noise is positioned neck only, like the other Strat was humming. There's no hum no matter which position I'm on. So every option out there has a role. And maybe what a lot of people do, not maybe, it's definite, is that you got a 63 Strat, use it in the studio, it's noisy, but you can say, all right, that's noisy, this is where I sit while I'm tracking. It's also a very valuable guitar. For that reason, also, you don't take it on the road. So you take a replica of that guitar on the road and you get some noiseless pickups, and then you can stand anywhere you want, and you're not going to hear the noise, and the audience won't know the difference. And you'll be happy enough as a player that it doesn't impact you. But you're like, yeah, the real Strat is just that much better when I'm in the studio. So those are your options. And there's one other option which I have not done myself, but if you buy a Suhr guitar, it comes built in with one of the options Suhr offers is a big dummy coil in the back. Basically the surround of the rear plate that would cover the tremolo cavity. It's a dummy coil that's always wired up with these pickups. So if you're on, say, the neck pickup and you would normally have hum, that dummy coil is there giving it the same reduction in hum the same way you get with this. And what Suhr does is on those guitars, if you don't have that dummy coil, this position, they're not doing a reverse wound for the middle. So this position, neck and middle, would have hum, as would number 2 position, bridge and middle. but the dummy coil is added in for the reverse polarity, which makes it basically like a big humbucker that still sounds like a traditional single coil. But you have to buy the Surs to get that. There's a third party that sells it, but it's a big contraption. I've not tried it because it's much easier for me just to say, all right, for this guitar I'll have noiseless, and on this guitar I'll have traditional, and I'll just rotate as necessary. That's a very long answer, but that's the easiest way to show you. Any idea of the percentage of old 50s Fenders out still working? I mean, amps or guitars? Imagine amps an awful lot. Guitars, they're capable of working, but most people are, the guitars are more valuable. Most people are not wanting to gig with a 50s Fender these days, but there's no reason you could not. You take a 54 Strat, first year Strat, have Brad put on a new nut, do a fret job, and clean it all up. You could gig with it totally. You know, true, a 54 pick guard might be falling apart, or the Bakelite on the pickup covers might be cracked, but people work with it. You know, there's no reason that the guitar cannot keep working, but there's a reason not to tour with a $100,000 guitar, or especially if you're playing down at the local pub. Now do that with P90s. All right, Wes, you asked for it. All right, bridge pickup, hum, much less hum. Neck pickup, hum, much less hum. Middle pickup, dead quiet. By the way, that's a P90 straight into a 65 reissue Princeton on 4.5. That's just what those pickups do. Your SG Special hates swinging within 20 feet of your Marshall 2203. You can hear Spanish radio stations. You've got a ground or shielding issue somewhere. I promise you. And remember, this is with the nickel-plated covers. This is the potentially most microphonic radio frequency problematic setup there can be. But I also wired that one, and I don't have any ground loop in there's no loop in how the ground inside the guitar is done. A lot of Gibsons, you get a redundant circle made, and that can actually be an AM radio antenna. I'll let Brad expand on that if he feels like it. Do I favor old tube preamps? No. I've not played around with too many old preamps. I would avoid the ADA stuff. I remember that nastiness. And I would avoid the Mesa. Well, I can't remember the name of it, the big tri-axis programmable MIDI thing, because it's got too many Vactrols that fail and too many, what do you call it, tantalum caps that fail. The Marshall one, though, the little 1-unit rack Marshall thing with MIDI is a pretty good preamp. Hey, Sean. I don't have any thoughts on the Chinese Hiwatts. I've not had them in, and I know that so many people have owned the Hiwatt name in the last 10 years. I don't know who made what, where, and I don't know if Chinese Hiwatts are just one batch. I think Brad had some nightmares with them, but I don't know. I looked into a recent small high watt. I looked inside it and it was built like crap and just said high watt on the outside. That's as far as cosmetics were as close as it ever came to being a high watt thing. The only high watts I've worked on have been the old ones. So take that. Maybe I'm a snob, but I do tend to like the Reeves era stuff. Yeah, drill presses are awesome. I've got one out in the back garage. I bring and put on the back deck when I need to use one. A lot of times, though, I do get lazy and I'll freehand it. Now, before Brad gets on to me, I'm not doing anything too critical. And if I'm doing a big bit or big step bit, or it's a largish thing into a stainless steel chassis, it's time for the it's time for the drill press and clamps because too much can go wrong. But most of the time, I'm doing relatively small holes with a step bit, or I'm drilling into aluminum, which I can treat like wood, and I can, as long as I get a center punch to start everything, and I'm very focused, I can get away with stuff in here. But I'm not also you're talking about working on a acoustic bridge, it sounds like, and so for that stuff, yeah, you need to get it very precise. You only get the one shot. Hey Wes, yeah, I usually do 3 hours on Saturdays. Last time I did 4 hours, but the fourth hour was just photography. Brad loves a series humbucker. Well, I put the wrong strap back because I've got the Sir Thornbucker wired for series parallel. I think you've heard that before on the channel, though. Fender changes the V1 bypass cap from 25 microfarad to 1 microfarad in 1970. What do I think was the reason for this change? I've not seen that. As far as the twins and supers and deluxes, it stayed 25 microfarad long after 1980. If you had a 70 Fender which had a factory 1 microfarad in V1, I can almost guarantee you that they used that because they ran out of the 25s and they stuck that in, and no one noticed, and it went on the line. But you're gonna have slightly less low end out of that channel. Yeah, the endless signature guitars. I'm a huge Alex Lifeson fan, but I was not rushing out to, no pun intended, to get an Epiphone Alex Lifeson Les Paul. And I can't afford the Gibson version, and I'm afraid that the Gibson version would have Gibson mistakes in the guitars that make it past the tech into Alex's hand are very different than the guitars that are that they actually sell to the public. I'll just say it that way. Bassman V1 cap bypass. All right, that's a very different thing. Well, the Bassman circuit was changing so much, and the 70 version is very different from other versions. They're trying to tighten it up a little bit and then they changed it in other parts of the circuit. But most of the Fenders stay 25 all the way down the line. The 70 changes are leading to not the best sounding era of Bassman. Yeah, the K line will almost always appear at some point. It's just I love the Eric Johnson. I've had it a really long time. I bought it new in what 2005, so 21 years, and that's a great guitar. But this K line Springfield, I mean, it's just so damn good. and I put it this way, I've played a lot of vintage guitars. I've played a lot of pre-CBS Strats. It feels and plays like a really great example of a, say, 63 Strat that's where the body's dried just the right way and all the excess moisture is gone and it's alive. So 3K gets you a 63 Strat. 3K won't even get you the case for a 63 Strat. And 3K won't even get you a custom shop that looks like a 63 Strat that's been dragged down the highway behind the bumper, but doesn't sound or play like a 63 Strat. Hey, if you like your American Standard, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's very confusing that they have the American Standard and they have the this and they have the that, and there's like 18 or plus models that are all called Stratocaster. We're not even getting into the Strat or the HM Strat and all this stuff. But thank you, Mr. Tommy. I have got dry mouth and an empty cup. I'm gonna go get something that's not coffee to drink. I'll be right back, and we'll get back to the questions. I'm not leaving you for long, just leaving you for just a second. Thank you very much for that, Tommy. It's very appreciated. Got my Photo Walk bottle. Always fill this with water and stick it in the fridge and stick it in my travel sack when I'm walking around. My photography bag. It's not a photography bag. And then when I get back, I rinse it out and fill it with water, stick it back in the fridge. So, see, I do drink water too. Let's see. Now, I have no complaints about Joe Bonamassa playing. He's a really good player. But well, this is the first time I've ever given anyone an inferiority complex. But always glad to always glad to help with people's mental health. Hey, Johan Janssen. Rate my recent gear upgrade, not delivered yet, from Deluxe Reverb Tone Master to TAD Blackface 22 watts. All right, so okay, you're going to an actual TAD version of a Deluxe Reverb with C12N, upgraded V1 V tubes to high grade 12x7 preamp tubes, also extra 5751. Well, there's no guarantee that you're going to notice any difference with the high grade 12x7s, but hopefully they've been sorted and tested well and they won't be microphonic. The main problem, I tell you, is you haven't received it yet. Other than that, it's perfect. At first, my brain went C12K. I'm like, oh, why did you do that? No, C12N. You should be very, very happy now that C12N will sound a lot better after 6 weeks of playing. So play it, and it'll get better and better. 6 weeks or so from now, all of a sudden one day I was just like, oh, man, this sounds better than it ever has, because the speaker needs to relax a little bit. You can also just run a Variac into it, give it like 2 volts for a while, but it's a lot more fun just to play the damn thing. I think you did a good job, Johan. I was in no way endorsing Coors or Coors Light. I was just saying, as far as things which are commonly sources of noise for gigging musicians, neon beer signs I could have singled out Budweiser or whoever. They're bad things for single coils. When it comes to rotating, to find the quiet spot, sometimes it depends on where the amp is in relation to where you are. So if this is noisy, but this is where you need to face, move the amp. Instead of having the amp over there, have the amp over behind you, whatever. And sometimes it's other things in the environment, or sometimes it's just a north, south, east, west kind of thing. That's why positions 2 and 4 are basically humbucking, and better to have a slightly scooped sound for the entire show than to have a coming through the PA. Yeah, those are tapped or partially stacked humbuckers, but there's nothing wrong with them. If and you like the sound, well, shielding is different than 60 cycle. You can have the best shielded guitar in the world. This is well shielded, but 60 cycle comes through. Shielding helps with environmental noise, which is different than the 60 cycle stuff. Yeah, but the Elite Strat dummy coil didn't sound very good. The stuff that Sure's got today is a much better implementation. But they don't sell it separately. You have to buy a Shure guitar to get it, which I can see both sides of. Otherwise, everyone who plays single coils in the world would buy them, which seems like they have a lot of sales. But then all of a sudden, people would be complaining that they're too hard to install, or installing them properly, and saying, "Oh, the Shure thing doesn't work," and it's just Is there advantages to having a tube rectifier over solid state rectification in a guitar amp? Traditionally, yes. Traditionally, there's a feel difference with tube over solid state, and certainly a voltage difference. And some amps, if they were designed for tube rectifiers, if you put a solid state rectifier in, you'd exceed the rating of the capacitors. In the past, as in, let's go back to the early 60s when these things were designed, tube rectifiers were everywhere. Every local hardware store sold tubes because televisions use them, radios use them, our amplifiers use them. And so you could get a GZ34, a 5AR4, a 5U4GB for cheap, and just the same way you would go buy windshield wiper blades today. But diodes were new. Silicon diodes were a new thing, hard to get, and it started off relatively expensive. Now silicon diodes are cheap, really cheap, and rectifier tubes are $30 and up each. Rectifier tubes also generate a lot of heat, common cause of failure, and need a more expensive power transformer to heat them. So in a new design, there's no reason to use a tube rectifier these days. You can get the same sound and feel by doing some solid state modifications to a rectifier circuit that uses diodes. But there are reasons that if you have an amp which has tube rectification, just keep using the tube rectifier. Well, Wes, I'd be glad to talk to you after the stream. Maybe we could sort out why your P90s are acting up so much. But a P90 should behave exactly the same to noise and stuff like that as a Strat or a Tele. It's the same technology. It's just different dimensions and has a different diameter wire with different numbers of winds. But in terms of this is noisy, this is quiet, that should all work the same way. It may come down to what kind of covers you have, but we'll talk about that. Let's see. That's good to know, John. Farm supply store sell graphite lubricant paint in bulk sizes. Cool. I'm gonna have to try that. I'm very sure I don't like Hamilton. I'm very, very sure I don't like Hamilton in the slightest. With the exception of You'll Be Back. That's funny. But the historical inaccuracy and the dumbing down of what were very interesting people at interesting times, and the crap music. I cannot stand Hamilton. Hey Wes, yeah, that I can't remember the drummer's name. He's a really nice guy. He plays with my buddy Joe Restivo, who you've seen on the channel. And they're playing at Lafayette's over in the square. I'd gone for a walk, and I ducked in to see who was playing. It was them. So this was around Christmas of last year, and I went in. The lighting was terrible, so I went black and white, and the lighting was low. This is an afternoon gig, and so I was like, I can either have capture the motion and have tons of grain, or I could do what I did. I'm going to surrender to the low light, and I think I was shooting like 1/30th. I have to look, maybe even slower. I was embracing the motion blur, but keeping the clean ISO. So that wasn't shot very high ISO, and I was metering for the highlights. So I got that nice strong contrast, and just started shooting mostly the drummer as he was playing, because I knew with the mallets and the sticks and the cymbals and the brushes, it was just kind of be what it was. And I got about 10 like that. That's the one I chose for today's stream. Thank you very much, man. That's on the old Fuji X-E2 with a Voigtländer 18 millimeter, so 27 millimeter on the Fuji. Probably like F4, if I recall. I could look it up, but I haven't. Yeah, those long pole pieces are there for a reason, Ted. Sorry, but routing is fun. Hey, School of Flourishing. What mic and camera do I use? Any advice if someone's starting streaming? Well, I'm going to be soon just going to start a second channel, and that's the kind of question I'm going to be doing stuff on. But I'm using a Sony FX30 with a Sigma 18 to 50 at 2.8 for these streams, and the manual focus when I'm doing the bench stuff. But for this, I'm using the autofocus in the Sony because it's excellent. And this is a SE Electronics SE 4100, which is kind of like a cardioid only version of a 414, though it's not as bright as a 414. Then I'm running into a Motu M6, and I've got a bunch of plugins in Lightroom in Logic to make it sound really good and work when I have an amp at the same time, or reverb on an amp that doesn't have it, etc. But I'll be glad to talk about more specific advice once I start the second channel. But if you're interested in the general stuff I do in the videos, I do have a video up on my channel called Let's Make a Video, or How I Make Videos, which was how I made videos about 1.5 years ago. I've changed the process and simplified a little bit since then, but because this is the kind of stuff that I've become very interested in, that I've had to learn an awful lot about, I'm going to do a second channel on that in photography, because they've become as interesting to me as the amplifiers, all because I wanted to show people better pictures of what the amplifier work looked like. You can start streaming with any of the recent generations of iPhones, though. I do recommend getting a different mic, because the iPhone mic sucks, and I'll give you very specific advice on that. I would say that if you wanted to start streaming, get a tripod, get a good source of light. I'm using I would recommend like a daylight balanced 120 by Amaran with a large softbox, your iPhone on a tripod, and go get the DJI Mic 2, I think it's called, with the transmitter, because the transmitter can hook up to your phone. Sorry, not the transmitter. You have the transmitter on your shirt, and the receiver hooks up to your phone, so you record with the audio from this straight into the phone rather than recording using the phone mics, because phone mics suck. And download Blackmagic Camera app, because that lets you record video on your phone so much better than what the Apple and Samsung and etc. apps do. The in-camera apps suck. The Blackmagic Photo app is awesome, especially for video, and it's free, which is a wonderful thing when free and awesome line up. It doesn't happen very often, but it does in that case. Let's see. I wouldn't want to have my only Les Paul be set up that way. And a lot of the stuff Alex is playing these days doesn't have that, but it's also, I would, if, first of all, he owns airplanes. He can have a Les Paul or Tim done that way. But, I could see having one of those as well, but that would be something afterwards. I don't know that I've ever worked on the Tiny Terror at Monash. I've worked on the Dark Terror, I think, and I've worked on some other oranges. I imagine the Tiny Terror is built the same way, just tinier. I don't have any complaints about oranges. In fact, Brad had a thing earlier this week talking about how impressed he was with one of the larger oranges. I'm not a big fan of the pots that they use, but other than that, I've had no problems with them. The Nowhere Man solo tone does not live in any amplifier with any guitar unless you are going into an EMI console with the treble set to stun and a Fairchild limiter. That's that sound. That's not just a guitar in the amp. And what's interesting to me about the way that was recorded was that had so much high end that would be painful to us to listen to digitally as it was actually coming out of the console, but they knew that the 2-inch wouldn't reproduce it, or whatever they were mixing to would not reproduce it. So they were cranking that treble and letting the EQ of the tape machine take off the painful stuff. So that's not something we can easily do live these days. Yeah, Greg, I've really enjoyed seeing them touring again. Uh, um, they're I miss seeing them out there, and they seem re-energized. It is very interesting hearing them with a different pulse. Just the beat, the feel is just in a slightly different place, a little more relaxed. And that's not a criticism of Annika. It's just they have a different engine driving the ship, and that's affects the entire thing. And I think in a positive way, they seem to be very invigorated by it. I don't think it's a money grab. I think they already had as much money as they would ever need. I think they just missed playing, and they knew the audiences missed them. I think it's one of the few business ventures that's actually mostly just because it would be fun. Have I come across any other Yamaha models or older Yamaha models? I've played some other Yamahas, but they've never been that successful in the U.S. market. They've always been kind of chipping away at the budget to intermediate market, and that's kind of the reputation they had. I think the Rev Stars are almost an attempt to get out of that, but I think they still have some brand perception changes to make in the United States, and maybe the reputation in Europe is very different. I don't. I don't think anyone can replace Neil, and but I also don't think that Annika is not being herself. I think Annika is playing the signature parts very well. I'm talking about Rush now, not Yamaha, but the signature parts that people are going to air drum to, she's nailing. The arrangement she's nailing, but there are fills that are hers. There are decisions that she's made interpreting Neil's material that she's doing great. I think she's coming across in a way that's respectful to Neil and his legacy. That's a tough gig, man. I don't know how would you want to be in Van Halen to replace Eddie? How would any of you feel doing? I mean, if not to replace casually, but my God, the pressure. And she's just going out there and playing really well. Beatles tone, Don't Let Me Down, Paperback Writer. Those are two radically different sounds, though. Don't Let Me Down is a telly and a casino into a twin. Paperback Writer is a 7120 hybrid Vox. Probably a Gretsch or the casino for the paperback. Might have been the SG. I bet TAD will do a pretty good job, and if the worst thing I can say about TAD is they'll do a good enough job that if something else if it needs a little bit of work to get it across the finish line, it won't be a lot. It won't be hard to do. Hopefully they won't make any stupid ground decisions. All right, we are at the top of the next hour, so I'm going to start to wind this thing down. Gone a little over 3 hours. May all of your sports ball teams win, even if you're all rooting for different people. May you all win. Pardon me. I appreciate you all being here, and I went to through most of the stream, always being caught up, and then at the very end here, I'm behind everything, of course. Those SEs are probably a little closer to the older 414 EB than the newer ones, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think it's not dissimilar to some older ones I've tried. Also, kind of AKG. If there's like a solid state C12, I don't know. It's definitely not the Neumann sound, but also not that UL or UBL, whatever it is, brightness. It doesn't have that sheen, which gets a little bit harsh with my consonants. I don't want to have harsh consonants. All right. Wow. I mean, I got so far behind at the very end. All right. I'm going to have to go check the Kennedy Center after this. Maybe make my day. All right. Thank you all, everyone, for joining us. And I'm sorry, I should probably have some catchphrase or whatever. Anyway, see you next time.